Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, I'll get it right in a minute. Welcome to the Exmoor Consultative and Parish Forum. Right, got the paperwork sorted out now. We'll go straight into apologies for absence. Thank you.
I've received 3, Andrea Davis, Louise Cotman and Jeremy Holton.
Thank you so much. Any others? No? Wonderful. Thank you very much. And we'll now agree the minutes of the forum meeting held on the 15th of September. Can I have a proposal for the agreeing those minutes, please? Thank you, Roger. Any matters arising from those minutes that are not covered in today's agenda? Page 1. And page 2. Nothing. Right. We've got a question from the floor, item 3 on the agenda.
It's quite a long one, so bear with me. It's about fibre broadband and it's going to be answered in the next item. I'll just read it out word for word. This rollout has been a disaster from start to finish with never-ending delays and in some cases overbuilding properties already served by fibre. This is all on the back end of having to overbuild fibre optic with airband and fixed wireless in, for example, Bury. Whilst airband and fixed wireless was meant to serve pretty much all of Bury. Planners failed to account for the fact there was a conifer plantation in the way, which meant only a third, if that, properties in Bury would actually ever be able to order the service. I was extremely happy when it was announced that Bury would be included in this game share clawback rollout, but delays have made the process extremely frustrating. Work essentially only started in March, April 2022, despite the whole project's original completion date being after the end of 2021. While Winsford has been connected, it looks like this was mostly part of the Openreach commercial rollout, if Openreach websites to be believed. Not to mention that most of Winsford's already had FTTC going back years ago on other areas are still painfully slow ADSL lines. As for the ongoing work in Bury, we have fibre installed on all of the telegraph poles to the end of Dye House Lane since April, only for the fibre spool to be left in a hedge ever since, due to encountering unexpected problems. In some ways, it's rather frustrating. We've lived here for almost 3 years at this point of COVID and continue with recently the internet. When is it going to be sorted?
Just before we go on, you people that are connected online, can you hear? That's okay.
Put your thumbs up.
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear, but that wasn't very clear reading out what the what was being said. But I think it's probably the speed rather than the sound.
I would concur with that as well.
This Bill Hodson in Minehead. I actually have a good link and clear performance.
Wonderful, thank you.
We can't decipher the actual words being said. I'm very sorry.
Can this on?
Got a microphone on that. We try to speak up when we're talking and see if that helps.
I think it's worth summarising what was said. I mean, essentially, there's really a concern that in Bury, the rollout hasn't worked very well. The reception's not very good. There's trees in the way. So I think we're going to get a response from everyone. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Wonderful. Right. So now we're going to find out exactly what is going to be done to put everything right, hopefully. And we've got Matt Barrow connecting Devon, Somerset engagement officer here to tell us what's going on.
Chair, just bear with me. So Right, so I will try and speak up for the benefit of colleagues on Teams, and apologies if that means that I'm too loud or too quiet. Just raise your hand for louder, lower your hand for softer. Audience participation never hurts. So my name's Matt Barrow. I am one of 2 engagement officers for Connecting Devon and Somerset, and I want to just take you through, as briefly as I can, the work of the project, what it is we are here to achieve, what it is we're perhaps not here to achieve, just to provide some parameters, give you a bit of history of connectivity on Moor, and then bring you up to speed with where we are and plans going forward. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce you to a couple of colleagues dotted around the room. Firstly, to my left, we have Faye Cross, just keep double checking on that. Who is Airband's newly appointed Community Engagement Officer for this part of the world. To be fair to Faye, she's been in post for a week, 10 days, so I would expect you to be gentle with her around the questions because she has a huge amount of learning and getting up to speed to do. Over there we have Sean O'Mahony from Openreach. I would expect you still to be gentle with Sean, but he has been around rather longer, and he's particularly responsible, the build manager for fibre build in and around Alderton, Winsford, and those parts to the west of the Moor. So he can provide you with some kind of granular detail. I'll pick up some of the points in the question about Barry, and then Sean can pick up some of the detail as to where we've got to and where we're going. So, if I just quickly whiz through flying in these bullet points. So Connecting Devon and Somerset is a partnership programme, large partnership programme of county councils, district councils, national parks, local enterprise, Building Digital UK, who are our paymasters from Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And we exist to bring those parts of the region to super fast speeds, so 30 meg or higher, who would not otherwise have. So that middle bullet point about market failure, essentially what that means is that the commercial market says it is worth us going to these properties over here because we can actually make a commercial case for it. We can actually get payback within a certain period of time. These properties over here, inevitably rural properties, are not commercially viable, so we will not go there without government subsidy. So a lot of our activity is heavily tied up with state aid requirements and the provability as to whether an area is commercially viable or not. And we go with taxpayer money to those parts of the region that aren't commercially viable. It is a hugely expensive activity. We spent over 90 million on our phase 1. And you can see that I'm not sure that that's entirely correct, but we have around 70 million invested in our phase 2 activity. To stress, when we started, we used the technology called fibre to the cabinet, and that delivers speeds of up to 80 meg per second. It is not fibre; it's a hybrid technology where the service runs the last part of the journey on the existing copper wire. So essentially, speed attenuates over distance, copper being a metal, there's resistivity, if that's a word, and the further you get away from the cabinet, the slower your speeds are. We only paid Openreach BT, who delivered the first part of our contract, for those properties that hit that magic 30 meg per second figure, and by and large that meant you had to be within around 1.2 kilometres of the cabinet. Beyond that, you would have got speed improvement, but actually designated as super fast. When we went to let our second contracts, we weren't actually able to in the first instance, so we created a specific contract for Dartmoor and Exmoor, because it looked as though when we went back out to procurement, those would be areas that we wouldn't get any bids for as part of the general contract, and that was won by Airband. Started in July 2015, rolled out over 3 years, delivering fixed wireless to a large part of the Moor, although not all of it. All of the technologies that we're looking at, the 3, primarily have strengths and weaknesses. Fixed wireless is a great technology in terms of speed of deployment. It's less invasive, and it is cheaper than some of the other alternatives, but it's not an exact science, and that in part plays into the question about trees around the berry. So when you model and design, you take into account as many of the environmental factors as you possibly can, and that includes obviously the topology, as well as things like trees, and the design information actually takes into account the National Tree Database and all sorts of other things. But it is ultimately a best guess based on the information that you have. So it's not always possible to be about who's going to get fixed wireless and who won't. And at the end of the day, it's often only when a customer orders a service that an installer goes out and actually makes a determination as to whether a property can be connected or not. Moving on from our phase 2 contract, we also have a thing called gain share, which is a separate contract, and that is a facet of the fact that from our first contract, any additional profit that Openreach derived from taxpayer money was then ploughed back in and returned by Openreach to the project to invest in further rollout. So essentially, because the taxpayer was funding the network, Openreach were making additional profits, and a proportion of those get fed back to us to do more work. And that's what Openreach are doing currently. So on the moor, that runs from bouncing up through Dalton up to Winsford, and there's also activity coming in from the east around Brompton Regis. I'm not really going to bore you with all of the detail on the slide, because Sarah suggested that I should be brief, and that's not my response. So the easiest thing to do is just not talk about this slide at all. You can see the figures on there. The top bit is our overall achievement. Most people don't care about our overall achievement. They're just interested in what's happening in their part of the world, and that's entirely appropriate. Roughly on Dartmoor and Exmoor, 5,000 properties, 4,000 at Superfast, 1,000 at an uplift. And you can see phase 2, we have an overall target of around 58,000 properties that we have to deliver. I'll come on to the voucher scheme towards the end when we look at next steps. So the metrics for Exmoor, in 2013, you had 0% Superfast coverage. 4,067 premises were delivered by fibre to the cabinet under our phase 1 programme with BT Openreach, and I'll show you where those are. And then an additional 2,500 through fixed wireless. Those were contractual premises. There will have been additional overspill, because whilst there are the weaknesses that I described with fixed wireless, what you also get is some properties that the model suggested couldn't be reached that can be. And at the moment, we keep a running total, even though that contract is dead and buried, we keep a running total of properties that can't get connected that we thought could. But also properties that can get connected and have been that we thought couldn't. And at the moment, the balance sheet is in the positive. So there are more properties that could be connected that we didn't think could be than can't be that we thought could. Forgive me, that's very tortuous. Which combined gives approximate coverage of 96% at Superfast. One of the things that's slightly challenging for us going forward is that obviously the conversation has moved on. And I can remember when I originally started coming to parish council meetings back in 2014, 2015, people would say, we don't care about Superfast. If you can get us 5 meg, we will be happy, because at the moment we're on 100k. That debate has clearly moved on considerably, and all of the drive now is for fibre. So we are now seeing a lot of pushback from communities who say, we've got this rubbish fibre to the cabinet, we're only getting 50 meg, something must be done. And we're trying to do that. We recognise the challenges within that. There are about 350 prems total on the moor. The reason for unusual vagueness, we usually quite accurate on figures, but we tend to report by county, by district, and by constituency, and obviously the moor being split between a number of those. essentially counted them last night, and I think that figure is plus or minus 5% accurate. So this map shows you the coverage that was achieved and where it was achieved on the moor. It's obviously population centres, so with fibre to the cabinet, you erect a new cabinet next to an existing one, you tie the two together, and then the service runs the last proportion on the existing copper lines with some of the challenges that that brings in. To explain this rather unpleasant colour scheme, the green areas in the centre represent the radius from the cabinet of around 1.2 kilometres, and then the purple fringe gives you the further radius up to about 1.8 kilometres, where you'll see a benefit over your existing broadband, but not super fast. It's really difficult to represent some of this coverage, and this slide is an example of that. But the dots then show, and if you kind of shuttle backwards and forwards between them, you can see that the fixed wireless then comes in as infilled. So back to the state aid conversation I was mentioning earlier on, we have to be very prescriptive about where we go. So the fixed wireless was intended to go in and deliver only to those properties that had not been connected using fibre to the cabinet under phase one. And you can see that obviously that dispersal it's much more rural, much more on the high moor. And then coming in from the south and east, we have our current contract on the moor, which is with Openreach. This is the gain share contract, and essentially runs up the valley, passing through Dalton and up to Winsford, I think, big bits of Wedden. It's important to stress that with fibre, what happens with our contracts is that we have to remain focused on the contractual premises, but what you're seeing here is not the totality of what will be covered, because as Openreach in this case, or Airband potentially in the future, run past properties, the fact that they have currently 31 megs, so they're technically covered by superfast, doesn't mean that as a commercial decision, a provider wouldn't say, well, of course, we'll connect you because we're coming past. The difference only then kicks in when you actually look at the distance. So if you are actually passed immediately by the infrastructure, you are likely to be picked up by it, even if you're not a contractual price. So the coverage that will be achieved by this contract and future ones is rather broader than what we're seeing here. Worth bearing in mind, though, one of the most common questions that we get is, I cannot believe that you came to point X and you didn't just go that extra mile to deliver to us. First thing to point out is that on the network that we're building, there is always an extra mile. There is always a property that is rather beyond. Average fibre prices currently and escalating rapidly in the current climate, round about £20,000 a kilometre. So if you're 500 metres away, it is entirely reasonable to think, I can't believe you got just here and then you stopped. Couldn't you just come up the lane to me? But that might be an additional £10,000 to connect. And that's Jackson Pollock, frankly, and that is an attempt to represent all of the coverage from the three contracts. I'm very happy the slides are slightly more meaningful, get closer to them. So the next steps for the moment, and I promise I will belt up. We need to complete the Openreach deployment in Dalton, Brompton, Regis, Roadwater. Dalverton, Sean will update on in a second, I'm sure, that is perilously close to being complete. That is part of, so the contract divides into 4 sections. That's part of Gain Share 1. Brompton Regis is Gain Share 3 and is beginning and is moving, but that will complete rather later. Openreach have their own rural exchange programme, which is the commercial side of things, not funded through the taxpayer, and that's also having an impact on the moor as more and more exchanges are released into that. And it speaks to the part of the question, the multi-part question around Winsford. So some of the properties in Winsford will have been completed as part of that rural exchange programme. And those are the properties that had reasonable fibre to the cabinet that have been upgraded. Those are not the ones that are funded by the taxpayer funding other properties in Winsford. You might think it's odd that there are different contracts serving a community as small as Winsford, but as we go further into rural areas, we are seeing that level of complexity around who is connected, what contract is this. And so I'm from Withy, and just outside, we currently have 3 fibre providers, all building to different properties within probably a square mile. And it's just the way it happens, I'm afraid. The main next push nationally, which may have an impact on getting fibre across the moor to those properties that have fibre to the cabinet, have fixed wireless but need that upgrade, is the thing called Project Gigabit. I can give you a certain amount of information, probably as much as you need, but that is run national, it's run by the government, it's not run by CDS or local bodies anywhere else in the UK. The whole thing is being contracted nationally. Essentially, we're part of what they call Lot 6, and the properties that will be included in the procurement are being chosen now. It is a labyrinthine process to establish that intervention area, but the intervention area will be known by the end of March, and then those areas will be offered out to the market under contract, and we will have an indication of who's been covered towards the middle of next year, which I would hope very much might provide coverage onto the moor. There are a whole range of complexities to that, but I think the best I can do is just kind of keep you informed as we get more information. If you're not picked up by that, there is a parallel process called the Gigabit Voucher Scheme, and that's whereby communities can get together and put in a bid to a provider to build them a network. And they can do that by accessing funding through government, which at the moment is £1,500 per residential property and £3,500 per business property. It has actually been a huge success nationally and regionally. We have seen hundreds of communities get connected by essentially designing their own network. The community gets to choose which properties are included, which properties aren't, and then contracting with Openreach or Airband or one of a number of other providers to pull together their own scheme. We've got something like 8,000 properties in the region that have been connected over the last 2 years. As a result of that, we're the largest consumer of vouchers in the UK, including Scotland and Highlands and Islands. And I think we have now drawn down around about 15 million as a result of that process. But we've seen it slow over the last 12 months. In fact, the number of applications in has more than halved. And that's essentially because those communities where you can deliver a scheme for 1,500 have by and large been done. And the communities that remain are much more expensive. So because of the multiplier effect, if it's actually going to cost you £2,000, you've got 500 per property, and that's just unsustainable. Helpfully, we have been told, and this is something that we've lobbied for strongly over the last 12 months, that the value of the vouchers is going to increase, and it's going to increase on the 5th of December. Unhelpfully, we haven't been told what it's going up to, and nor have we been told when we will be told. But I'm anticipating probably the 4th of December. There would be no point in increasing the value of the voucher by anything less than 500 quid. So I could confidently predict that it will go up to £2,000. I think it's likely to double. I think it's likely to go up to 3,000 for residential properties. And this has a genuine impact because it means that schemes that couldn't go ahead because they were too expensive now can. And a good example is Withythorn and Hawkridge, where we have been collectively talking about a scheme for 18 months, 2 years. Engaged with Openreach, the original quote came in at 567,000, so it was north of nearly £4,000 a property. Can't remember. It was completely unsustainable, completely unaffordable. They have recently re-quoted, and the quote is now coming at 1,800, I think. Anyway, if the value of the voucher increases to 2,000, immediately that project becomes affordable. You can have 160, 170 properties in, as you know, clearly a really remote part of the moor that can actually get fibre connectivity. The last line, and then I promise I'm done. The gain share bit that I talked about earlier, what we are spending at the moment is the first tranche of that. And since that was agreed, we have been accruing further funding coming back into the programme, which is in an investment fund and can start to be spent from early next year. So we will have a relatively sizable fighting fund that we can then inject either into new contracts or topping up the value of vouchers, where let's say the value increases to £3,000, but you have a community where the quote comes in at 4,000. We might be able to increase the value of the voucher by £1,000 for each of those properties. Sensing a certain amount of blazing going on, so I will belt up. Do we want to open it to questions? Do we want Sean to talk about the?
You say £20,000 per kilometre.
Can they? Yes.
Well, I qualify for the universal service obligation. I live 2 miles from the nearest cabinet in Wedding Cross. When through the universal service obligation got a quote through BT, got a quote from Openreach to bring it 40 metres from my house where there is a fibre cable, an inspection well chamber with a joint in the cable. Guess what the quote was? It wasn't the £500 that 40 metres by divided into 20,000.
250,000.
77,000.
77.
To bring it
Right.
40 metres.
So really good point, and we might be able to do something about that.
We can't. I've tried. I've also been to the ombudsman on the whole thing, and what they want to do is they just want to ignore the fact that there's a cable there. They want to bring you company want to bring it 4 miles from Timberscoombe when there is a cabinet 2 miles away. And I can't get any information from them. They won't talk to BT Openreach, BT's universal service obligation, and Openreach, and BT said they can't get any further information why they can't use the cable wires.
Right. So it's a really good point. Sorry.
I'm just saying, you said it might be able to help.
So we had a very similar situation to this on our current contract build. It happened to be outside Shawprior in Plymouth. Exactly the same thing where the fibre ran past, it was rather longer than your case, ran past the top of the lane that led down to 3 properties. And there was a pole at the top of the lane and our fibre was going past it. And the 3 properties down there talked to the USO team and got a quote for 260,000. We did manage to unravel it. They have been connected for nothing. And part of the issue is, so the universal service obligation is a contract held by BT and the USO team, and it's delivered by Openreach. The USO team within Openreach are not allowed to talk to other parts of Openreach. As a consequence, I know. So as a consequence, when they design, they often design absent the knowledge of the infrastructure that is being put in. Obviously, if it's put in 10 years ago, it's actually, it's there on the network diagrams, but particularly stuff
put in about 12 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, so that's even on it. Anyway, we did manage to get that one resolved. If I can have any details, we've now got, and I have to say it was, on one hand, yes, I know the fact that different parts of the organisation can't talk to each other, but that in part derives from the government mandated split between BT and Openreach, and there are Ofcom regulations that were put in to actually mean that that split meant something rather than just being completely artificial, and that does cause a kind of communication problems. We resolved it in the case of True Love Farm. It took a while, but it did end up with finding a way that Openreach normal, if you like, the USO Openreach team and other parts of Openreach could actually talk to each other, and we got it resolved. So I'm really happy to take up that case.
Richard?
Yeah, I'm running away, so I want to write down your details there.
We're all with you anyway.
Yes.
Richard Peake, Northampton Parish Council, along with living there. Now, about a couple of years ago, I think either you or one of your colleagues came on during and did a presentation and showed us a map that perhaps at the time, well, it showed what it was. Now, the west of the village is being dealt with by airband. Part, well, I have to say this is with my own hat on, is on the gain share bit.
Yep.
We were told.
Yep.
Had no information as to when in that contract between Northampton and Twitchin anything's going to happen. You've been talking about here going up. Now, I know it's just outside the park boundary, but the parish is in the park. So just the question is, I mean, I was on there showing 2 commercial properties. It so happens that now I don't even have a landline because I'm afraid it just wasn't any good. I'm working on mobile only, which is
expensive. Yeah,
expensive. Whereas I'm shown to be taking 2 dots for, because I had 2 broadband lines for fibre, and further down the lane, another off-site property for a further line. Can you give us any information as to timing?
Okay.
Or whether it's going to happen?
Sean may be able to. If not, I'll take it away and I can certainly give you that information. Yeah.
Because I mean, I think airbags. I mean, I speak to somebody who had wireless internet 20 years ago. I wasn't living there, I was living somewhere else with Southwest Internet.
Yes. Yes.
I had 6 meg download and 4 meg upload 20 years ago.
Yes.
And then improved a lot since then. But I can't hit the mast, and that's why I can't have airband wireless now.
Right. Okay. So I don't know, Sean, whether you've got any info on.
So I'm not knowing the actual address. There are works started in Northampton. They're on surveying yesterday.
Yes, because you were. If it's your with a cherry picker around. Yeah, well, he's the end of the lane. So I saw them yesterday.
So there are works going on in Northampton. There's going to be a huge route that goes sort of from the main exchange area in there, down Main Street, out of that lane you were talking about. So the overhead works have been done. The underground works are sort of planned over the next couple of weeks, next couple of months.
Fine, thank you. Now, that gives, I mean, I have seen, I've seen vehicles there with cherry pickers, a couple of vans, cherry pickers, looking at obviously the state of what's there.
So this contract is currently contractual in March next year.
Right.
So these guys are really up against it, working to deliver. But I would hope sooner because that's yes.
Any other questions?
Can I ask please about the mosque on Winsford Hill? Because I attended a meeting that was run by the Rural Services Network down in Exeter in October. And I think BT and Openreach have both got the message that it's rather dangerous to take away people's copper line if there's only fibre available and then there's a power cut. You can't get emergency services or anything else. They gave me an address, an email address for the Home Office. I've written to the MP and I've spoken to everyone that I can think of speaking to about when this mast is going to be operational.
Right, so I really don't want to be seen as slave and shoulders, but we have no involvement in mobile phone whatsoever. The best that I have is that some of the colleagues I have who work on the programme in the past did work for mobile phone companies and they've got mates and they're happy to phone them. We've got no formal communications channels at all.
Know about this, shouldn't they? Winsford Hill mast?
Well, if it's a mobile phone mast,
Well, it's the I've put it out. It's a Home Office emergency services mast. we were promised that it would be public community. So
Right. I will see if I can find it.
Sorry, just to help out there, it's one of the Home Office emergency service mast network that they're
Right.
putting up on Exmoor over the course of the last probably 5 years.
Oh.
A number of which, probably all of them, have yet to be turned on, and we are left in a state of utter confusion and lack of knowledge because as the fibre rollout carries on, of course, the copper network is being suspended or removed. That therefore means that if you get an occasion like we had earlier in the winter with Storm Eunice, and you lose electricity, and you're only on fibre, your phone, which you might be relying on for emergency contact, will only last as long as your batteries might, which I think was about 45 minutes was the local experience last time. So we're desperate for this emergency services network to be operational, and we can't find out from anybody when it's going to be.
Okay, right. So no, that's clear, and also particularly if I recall, what Rob sought into the wound is the fact that the planning permission, by and large, was granted in part on the predication that not only would it be used for the emergency services, but there would be immediate benefit to residents because they could use it, and therefore that makes it all the more galling. I will see what I can find out. The best route is a former colleague who used to be a director of BT, who in his last couple of years was responsible for the migration to EE. He's still active, although he no longer works for EE. He's a consultant that I would have thought he might know. I will ask him. I don't have any direct route, and I'm really sorry because I do particularly understand the problem. The power issue is complicated, and in fact, I'm trying to currently pull together an article that explains the different elements of copper switch off, and why some of people's fears are perhaps misplaced, but others are very, very real. And the power issue, as you say, is the key one. Particularly because the regulations from Ofcom say that providers have to provide a service that can last up to an hour following a power cut, which means that you have to have your emergency within the first hour, which is nonsensical. And I found myself in a rabbit hole last night where I was actually reading an interview with Openreach's head of customer care, who essentially said anything beyond an hour, that's not a telecoms issue, that's a power issue. You need to be talking to Western Power and Distribution because their network needs to be more resilient. It doesn't sound like a head of customer care to me. But that's just a personal observation and not one of a Devon County Council employee. I'll see what I can find out.
We've got a question from someone online.
Okay.
Julian.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask if CDS are not in the know or don't have responsibility for knowing when the masts are going to be switched on, can I ask who does know that? Is there anyone in the National Park Authority who has a link, presumably either through planning or through some other commercial department, about when this is all going to happen?
I've been speaking to Dean on a regular basis about trying to find out. And even Dean, our head of planning, finds it almost impossible to get anybody in the Home Office to give him any accurate information. Dean is utterly mystified as to why they cannot turn on each mast as it's finished, rather than having to wait for the whole lot to be done before they activate the network. I don't know that there's an obvious reason why they can't just turn on each mast in turn, but at the moment it seems, and Julian I'm sure is thinking of the Withypool mast, which is just above where he lives, which has been finished for more than 2 years and is just lying completely idle. But the Home Office are people that have to say, and so anything that you can do that to get the information out of the Home Office, because up to now we haven't been able to, would be extremely helpful.
I will do my best.
Thank you.
This broadband subject is something that the National Park is trying to do everything it can within its power to do something about, but not one of our statutory requirements, and we're doing it to really help the communities of Exmoor, and why that part should be supported as much as possible. Roger.
Your EE masts, Cornerstone, the company that manage EE's network. I've got some, I can talk to Stephen or whoever afterwards. I've got some phone numbers of key people within Cornerstone / EE, and you can get into them just like that. So, brilliant. Perhaps we can know stuff up with. Sean, we've got a big problem. It's fantastic the work that's going on up here on Exmoor and the drive up through to Wedding Cross. But road closures, you're responsible at the end of the day for taking down those signs, or at any time of the works that you are not working on site. And we've got continuing problems up in Wedding Cross where the road signs are not taken down at the end of the day, and especially at weekends. So the diversions for any road closure across Exmoor, as we all well know, are horrendous. With HGV lorries and, you know, large traffic and everything else. So can you please tell your boys on the ground, and you're well aware of the responsibilities of it all. So can we please not see this in the future?
I'll certainly try to get that away and speak to our traffic management supply, yes. When are they still up now, Wedding Cross?
Periodically they have been at the end of the days, they haven't been taken down and at weekends, and people are so fed up with it. Businesses, you know, across Exmoor that are trying to run businesses and everything else, and yeah, we all just despair really. It's just an ongoing problem that keeps happening,
and more frustratingly, when the work gets postponed or doesn't go ahead, they put the signs up and don't take them down. We had this issue between Exford and Wedding Cross a couple of weeks ago, where you just put the signs up.
I mean, the key thing is on any road closure sign, where somebody drives up and they see a road closure, is the diversion, or at that road closure, it should say, oh, that Winsford is still open for business. Or, you know, should give more, should be giving more information on these road closures. I'm not just aiming at you, it's Wessex Water and the Highways Authority as well. We need to be putting more information on, you know, on these road closure books.
Any other questions? Kevin?
Yeah, I'm just for clarity. Could you just list the 3 schemes, was it, that affect Winsford specifically?
So the 2, I think, there's Open Reach's Rural Exchange Programme, and there is the CPS funded Game Share contract. Those are the 2, I believe. Historically, in the past, we did connect parts of the parish using fibre to the cabinet. That is now being upgraded by Open Reach's commercial activity, and the bits of the parish that were not served by our phase 1, we are delivering through Game Share. So you should have, and I always hesitate to say 100% coverage because there are always some properties that are too far, but the coverage should be pretty good and split between those 2 contracts.
We've got one more question.
There's a new post put in at Elworthy. Is that for broadband, or because nobody got any idea what it's for?
I would need to check.
And is Jurassic Fibre operating at Elworthy?
No, not to the best of my knowledge. I don't think they've come that far.
No, right, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're heavily active in Taunton, but their build methodology, for sensible reasons, because they currently operate any subsidised contracts. So they're in Tiverton, Taunton, Warrington, they're in the market towns, etc. Because rural areas are just too expensive commercially.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's very unlikely it would be Elworthy. But I can certainly check and come back to you through Hayes.
Yeah, right.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
Last one.
Just a quick one. The biggest problem was that none of this was explained to people in Winsford when they were going to change to Class Fibre. And so what happened was that some people got told, oh, well, you can keep your copper line, because you've got a child. Some people were told, oh, you can't keep your copper line and you can't have it back. So there was no consistency whatsoever with it being rolled out. And so some people got a battery backup, some didn't. And it's just rolled on like that.
Yeah, I think the problem is that conflates the build part of the process, actually rolling out the fibre, with in parallel this notion of copper switch off, which on the one hand is made possible by the rollout of fibre, but it's not part of our decision making as far as CDS is concerned when we're not open into the switch off copper, and equally it's not part of Sean's process because he's just trying to build the network. But I do understand that, I mean, for starters, copper switch off is a really unhelpful term because it ties together at least 3 different moving parts, all of which have completely different deadlines. One of those is the potential reclamation of the copper wires, for which there is no real timescale whatsoever. But the idea of copper switch off, everyone kind of conflates that in their heads and just worries that somebody's going to come out with a big pair of shears and just cut down their copper line, and that, you know, couldn't be further from the truth. And a lot of the narrative around copper switch off is actually around moving telephony services from analog to digital, but those digital services will continue to run on your copper wire. There's also a bit about a stop sell, so once you hit 75%, you can't order a product. But Openreach are absolutely on record saying that only applies to 75%. If you can actually achieve fibre, and if you're on 25%, you get to keep your copper, and indeed you can order it if you develop a barn, turn it into a residence, didn't formally have a line. If that new residence can't get fibre because there's no fibre in the area, you can order a copper line and you can continue to do so. But it's just very misleading. And you're right, there isn't really one central source of clarity.
They actually said at that meeting, the Rural Services Network meeting, that copper will be switched off by 2025. And that's what people believe. And people now have said in the parish council, well, why did I have to give up my copper line? So, again, it's true, but it's misleading. So there are 2 different types of copper. There's E side and D side. So the E side is the copper that runs between the exchange and the cabinet. And the D side is the distribution side that runs from the cabinet to your property. Copper switch off actually technically refers to E side. So if you're still on a copper line, it just means that they need to have run fibre to your cabinet, and the projection is that the vast majority of cabinets will have been enabled from fibre by that point. So there's a degree of confidence that they can say December 25, no more copper. Brackets apart from the one that goes to your house, and that just doesn't come across in the way that it's been put together. On the other hand, I do understand the problem of actually trying to produce this, because 2 weeks ago in a team meeting, I wasn't paying enough attention and got a hospital pass where I, on CDS's behalf, have been asked to write a concise guide to what copper switch off means. And I've been working on it for the last couple of weeks, and it's a right public because it's really difficult to explain. But it's not, I don't think, currently. This is, you know, Schadenfreude is really going to come back and bite me, but I don't think any of the providers is currently describing it from the point of view of a customer and what it means to the customer sufficiently effective.
Right, thank you very much, Matt. It just comes down to the fact that communications, and it's ironic that communication with the people that should be providing it, it's communications between everybody, local parish councils, the county council, people that are the end product, the end people at the end of the day, people that are using this product, and the national park. If you can keep us informed, we do communicate with the people of Exmoor. So I'd like to thank Matt and the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, pleasure. Sorry to bang on a bit. I'm really sorry, I have to get to Manchester, so I've got to go now. If I can take your details, I don't know if Sean and Faye want to stay around, maybe answer questions or not, I'll leave that up to them. But I have to go, and I'm very sorry to miss Sarah's presentation, because I'm sure it's good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Right, we're now going to go on to item 5, which is Dan James to start off with a presentation on the National Park Conference. Dan.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So just a very brief intro really from me to this item, but you'll probably be aware that back in September, we hosted the UK National Parks Conference. This is normally a biannual event. It hasn't taken place for a few years due to COVID, and it was our turn to host. So we took the opportunity though to change it a bit. When the idea really behind the conference is to bring together members, senior officers from the 15 UK national parks to share ideas, to share learning, to think about the future collectively, and a bit of time out really from the day-to-day to focus on some of those bigger challenges that perhaps always get pushed to the bottom of the pile with the day-to-day pressures. As I say, we took the opportunity really to change the format. Partly this was driven by necessity. We had about 130 attendees, and there is not a single venue that could accommodate those kind of numbers on Exmoor in terms of accommodation, etc. But also we wanted to try and bring it down to earth a bit more, make it a bit more real, give more time to meet with communities and other partner organisations, and a bit more time really for networking and sharing of ideas informally outside of the formal sessions. So we hosted it in Dunster in the Tide Barn with various local businesses accommodating for delegates, which I think was a really good model and worked well in terms of spreading the benefits as widely as we could, and we were able to significantly reduce the cost to each of the national park authorities, and indeed to ourselves as a host authority. It didn't cost us anything in terms of cash. We secured sponsorship, for which we are very grateful to both Dextra Lighting as our main sponsor and also the Ordnance Survey who sponsored the study tours. And as I say, the study tours was a whole day, so we were really only together for kind of a day and a half, really, or two days at most, really. But people arrived, evening session, a whole day out on study tours, and then a final plenary session on the final morning. And the study tours really gave the opportunity to showcase Exmoor, to meet with lots of communities, to understand some of the projects going on. So we've got a short video. It's only a couple of minutes long, which Hazel will start for us in just a moment, just to give you an idea of the kind of the feel of the conference, if you like, and some of the themes coming out. Online, we do have a full conference report. We have got a fuller video, which is about 12 minutes with interviews from various of the speakers. And also we've got audio recordings of all of the main sessions. So if you're interested in any of the topics in more detail, please do have a look. The overall theme was about what does the nation need from national parks today? So it was really kind of turning things on its head, not what do the national park authorities need, but what does the nation that we serve require from us? So yeah, we'll watch the video and then Sarah will talk you through some of the key outcomes.
Thank you, Mike. So yeah, that was a bit of a taster, really. There is a longer version which is on the website, I think, Dan? Yeah, which is a full 12 minutes. That's whetted your appetite enough. So it was a bit daunting when we went into this because you only get to do these things every sort of 20 odd years or something. So I have to say we were slightly terrified at the amount of work, the cost, the sort of huge distraction. But I think, looking back, enormous credit to Dan and Judy and Katrina, who did the most incredible job and pulled this off. And I think probably one of the best national park conferences that I've been to in my many years of attending these things, because it was much more grounded. We had brilliant speakers, really, top level speakers, but we also were out and about in the park, meeting people, hearing about all the great things that are going on, the projects that we've been involved with sort of over recent years. So, we had Tony Juniper, Sarah Mukherjee, Julian Glover, we couldn't, Annette Batters, we couldn't have got a better kind of keynote speaker list. So that was fabulous. It's always hard to, what came out of it, what were the outputs, if we're really honest. I think there are a few themes, and I've got some conference reports here. These are also online, and I didn't want to print hundreds of. I'm just going to throw a few around, and you'll get an idea. And again, if you do have a look online. But there was a very strong theme about the power of national parks. It's a complicated model. It's about integration. It's about people working together, connecting with a place. And it came out of that post-war movement. And perhaps it's more relevant, it's more important than it ever was, but our national voice isn't very loud. We're somehow not working as a collective to make people aware, to make politicians aware, to sing the praises of national parks. And I think we're sort of reflecting on, why is that? Why are we not in the spotlight? Why are we not getting that sort of national voice across? Because the themes of things that we deliver are so important, aren't they? The protection of nature, biodiversity, equality, diversity, opportunities for everybody to experience nature, to experience beauty in their lives. And that's more important than ever. And I think the other theme around, the green economy and the growth and the importance of farming and the integration of farming and nature and tourism, never been more important. That sort of investment in these places. But I sometimes wonder whether our model is actually slightly too complicated. It is about the integration, and when you try and get that over quickly, it's quite difficult to make the case in a very clickbait, soundbite kind of culture. So, what else came out of it? Yeah, the themes, things around, you've got a louder voice, you've got to make yourself relevant, because otherwise you won't exist going forward. And I think the idea of compromise, there was a very strong theme about, we don't want polarised debates about whether it's about farming or rewilding or this person or that person, binary decisions. It's about finding the sweet spots and doing this sort of thing, working together, understanding each other for the common good. So I really enjoyed it. It was absolutely exhausting, I have to say. It was just like 3 days of it. But I think we all came away with a bit of a renewed sense of purpose and mission. It's very much a national park thing. I mean, Dan and I really tried to make it much more of a community thing, but I think at the end of the day, most of the delegates are national park members from the other 15 national parks and staff. So it is inevitably a bit of a national park thing rather than a community thing. But, any questions or any thoughts or reflections from what you've seen? Roger.
Yeah. I looked at the bigger video presentation that it didn't show it on at the last Park Authority meeting, but there was a lot of comments coming from the speakers that you had about nature. Yeah. It would be good for this Park Authority, before they come to a conclusion about nature, to do a nature survey with much of the landscape in private ownership, in order for you to have in order for you to have a better understanding as to what nature we have got here. We've got an awful lot of nature. But, you know, you don't, it's, because it's always talked about the loss of habitat and all these other sorts of things. So I wonder from that point of view.
Do you want me to answer that now, Roger?
Well, no, can I just finish?
Yeah.
Thank you. I would encourage all parish councils and any individual that are interested in the future of this national park to look back at the Park Authority video conference of the meeting on the 1st of November, because it's quite worrying, I think, as to the comments coming from Park Authority members as to the future of, dare I say, this committee even. You know, this group, us sitting around here as this group of people that represent the parishes and, you know, and the interested people in the, you know, and the members of the public here as well today. Because it was mentioned at that meeting, in and around the budget, that we should get over on 6.6 of the budget. It was discussed or proposed by a member of the committee that we should communicate that with the parishes. So we're all, you know, recently probably having parish council meetings, that we should communicate this. But disappointingly, when you look back at the video of that meeting, there were certain comments that come in from members that no, it was a public meeting, and it wasn't, you know, it wasn't their responsibility. It wasn't the Park Authority's responsibility to communicate this. Well, we have sitting in the room just behind us there the new comms person for the national park, and it would be great to get her ideas as to how we can all move together, not just the Park Authority, but the wider community of this Park Authority, and get these thoughts over to us, because it was mentioned by one Park Authority member that well, and it was discussed amongst other Park Authority members that the format of this group, that we shouldn't be discussing some of the things that we discussed at our last panel meeting, because it didn't meet the criteria of the national park. It was said by one Park Authority member that we're not responsible for buses, housing, and schools and education. Well, I would think that we, you know, all disagree that the aims of this national park is to support the community, especially around housing and all the other services that we rely on. So let's all go back and look at that and possibly come to the next meeting, because potentially under the cuts, this group, us group sitting around here, there may be a decision that they cut this and we lose this opportunity as an engagement from the parishes and the people that live up here into the Park Authority. So I would hope that we would never lose that. I think Nick Thwaites probably summed it up by the comments that he made, but you can gauge that when you look back. And just as a final point, there were certain things said, and then 10 minutes later, it was being contradicted by other comments that were coming over. So I just feel, you know, if we don't watch out, there's gonna be the national park, and there's gonna be us as the parishes and people that live up here. We need all to work together. We understand, you know, there's budgets and cuts and everything else, and we just, you know, with our new comms person, and just the other thing, from the point of view of, I spoke to you before, Sarah, that understand that we're now employing more people in planning. looking back, it's quite interesting. The other thing that you can look back on is the spending over £500 of this park authority, and it lists down all of the things that we're spending on over £500, and that makes quite an interesting read, because I think in September we spent just over £15,000 in private consultants on planning. So yes, there we go. And it's and dare I say, Mr. Chairman, you're sitting at the back of the room. You know, we need to get more engagement of the structure that we've got in the parish forum members. So all those parish forum members were, as I understand, Mr. Chairman, we had the hustings and everything else, and we came to a decision across the parishes that we put those persons into those positions, and it would be good as a collective that we have more engagement and that. So there's a lot to communicate with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anything came out of the conference from my point of view, the days that I attended was, and it was said to me by virtually everybody I spoke to, we never realised how wonderful Exmoor was. And I think if we can take anything away from the conference, it's the fact that we should realise how lucky we are to live where we live, because we have a wonderful, wonderful national park. It's brilliantly run, and there'll always be difference of opinion, disagreements, but in general, I think, you might say, you're bound to say that, but I think in general, we do a very good job on a very, very limited budget. A budget that's getting smaller rather than increasing, and we've got to try to spend the money we get the best way we can. And we will have to make adjustments one way and another. But in general, compared to a lot of the national parks, we are out front. We're doing a far better job. I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that, Sarah.
I agree. Back to Roger's questions, really, if you'd like me to, Mike. I've made three or four areas you asked questions about. First was we should do a nature study of the whole of the national park. Oh God, I would love to do that. I would love to have the money to be able to survey, everything, all of that.
300,000.
An awful lot more than that, I can assure you. So at the moment, the SSSIs are monitored by Natural England. They don't get around to it as regularly as they know they should. Some of them have not been surveyed for 10 or 20 years. To monitor everything, you can imagine it would be impossible. I mean, nobody could. That would never happen. It happens to a greater extent on nature reserves, but for the general whole of the national park, we have to use indicators. So, for example, every 8 years, until recently, when we didn't have the money to do it, we've been monitoring the state of moorland birds. So moorland birds tells you something about the state of the moorland, tells you about other things. We're able to monitor the deer because we work with EDDMS, we have volunteers who go out and help. We monitor otters every year because we have volunteers. So in some areas we've got good data, probably got really good data on bats now, because every time anybody wants to do anything, we have to do a bat survey. So we've got some great data on bats. Other areas we know very, very little. Things like insects, again, very few specialists that can do it. So some of the information we have is very specific to science. So while I agree it would be amazing, the target would be enormous. So we do what we can with the resources we've got, with all of our partners, Exmoor Natural History Society, the Wildlife Trust, the National Trust, Natural England, a lot of people in this game. And what we do is every 5 years, we try and pull that information together so you have a feel of the direction of travel. And most of the directions of travel are not very good. Most of the trends are that nature is in steep decline. It's not our fault, it's the whole way the world is. Nature doesn't exist in a vacuum on Exmoor, does it? It's influenced by everything else that's going on. So some things are moving up a bit. Some of the moorland birds, for example, are improving, but Generally, things are not in a great state. So that's my nature thing. The November committee, I think I'd have to go back and listen and have a bit more of a detailed conversation. But I mean, certainly on the budgets, it's we know, because we've been on flat cash since 2019, and the DEFRA is saying flat cash continues to 2025. Not heard the budget yet, so I don't know if there's anything that's going to, you know, coming that way. There could be further cuts, but on the trajectory we're on, we're 500,000 short by 2025. So we have to start making plans to deal with 100,000 this year, 200,000 next year, and so on. Which does mean, as we said in the media, we're going to have to do things differently. We're going to have to lose staff. We're going to have to close services. And it's a question of which services. And it means we've got to make efficiencies. And that means looking at our committees, committee meetings, our parish meetings, our partnership plan meetings, all of it to say, can we do this more efficiently? Can we do it differently? Who can help us? How can we maintain the great work we do, but do it with less resource? And that's the reality that, you know, I'm facing. And I would love to carry on doing everything that we do, but until I find the magic money tree, we can't. You mentioned buses, houses, education. It's not our job. Yeah, it isn't our job. We would love to be able to run buses so that people from everywhere could come and visit Exmoor. We can't. It's not our job.
No. It's probably your job to show an interest, and especially around housing. You know, we've got big problems up here.
Housing we're connected to because we're the planning authority. So we have an overview of trying to make sure that local people can continue to live and work on the moor. Absolutely. But ultimately, at the end of the day, finding houses for people is not our job. Our job is to set the policy framework and to make sure that it happens, to monitor it, to feedback, to support. But ultimately, it's going to be Somerset Unitary and Devon, North Devon and Devon County Council, isn't it? It was in Glover Review. There was a
don't talk me about Glover Review.
Take it on. The viewers know you've got existing organisations whose job it is. I know it's not what you want to hear, but that's.
Well, as I said, it was just disappointing to look back at that meeting on the 1st of November to hear the comments coming from the floor. And we all need to be working together. I mean, the chairman has now joined us. He's sitting there. He's a parish forum member and chairman of this park authority. It might be nice if either yourself or Sarah introduce the lady that's sitting behind there in the public gallery, who's our new comms person from the park authority, so that if we see her walking around, or if we feel that we want to raise a communications thing, we can we know put a name to the face. So it might be nice if she was introduced to us.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. This is Caroline Cook, who's our new communications lead. So do you want to say anything, Caroline?
Hello, yes, nice to meet you all. Yes, just to answer what Roger just said, I've literally just come on post, so I am very much backgrounding at the moment, getting my head around it. As you can appreciate, coming into a new organisation, there's an awful lot to know. This is a very complex one. I'm very interested to hear everything that you have to say, which let's get across, of course. Feel free to contact me. But I am still learning, so as we heard earlier, be gentle. That's all I'll say. So, yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to obviously champion the work that's done here as well. To also hear his. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we have thrown her in at the deep end a bit this week, haven't we? I think we've made all the national newspapers just about, well, so the Times, the Independent, the Guardian, Spotlight, Farmers Guardian.
And just quickly, last point, there was a number of key things that were discussed at that November meeting about the legacy that you've been left, some £300,000, and then that you're then going for lottery funding money. That we'd all probably love to know as to what the programme of that spend's going to be. Will that actually deliver any trees up on that landscape? And
Well, the bid's literally just gone in this week.
Yeah.
So there'll be months until, certainly into the spring before we hear. If it is, it's over, I think it's a 4 or 5 year programme. So there will be improvements, there'll be some change, but it's not going to be anything radical. So you can imagine if you spread that much money over 5 years, it's noticeable, but it's not going to be radical change. It's based around Simmons Bar, so it's based around working with young people, improving nature, better access to nature, and sort of, really reinvigorating that sort of Simmons Bar forest landscape.
And just the last point, through you, Chair, I'd like to ask the Chair of the Park Authority as to regarding 6.6 of the budget. It was put by a Park Authority member that we should communicate better, and we should have put that over. And so what's your thoughts on that? How are we gonna get better communications?
Right, yeah, I will answer that. Definitely, Roger. Well, first of all, actually, you make a very valid point. It's rather interesting that of everyone here, you're the only one that's mentioned you've actually listened to the meeting or viewed it. So there's a challenge to everyone within that attends Parish and Consultative Board. If you want to have an interest, if you want to know what's going on, and if you want to know what members' comments and thoughts are, listen to the meeting. You don't have to come and sit here. It's all recorded. You can sit and listen to it at leisure with a cup of coffee at home. And I'd encourage everyone to do so. What was quite the bit, there were varying comments, Roger, through that meeting. But what it actually highlighted was there's no definitive approach at the moment. There's an awful lot of discussion and consultation needed. I would suggest to everyone, listen to the minutes of the meeting, talk to one of your authority members, whichever one it is, whether it's Stephen or it's Francis or it's myself or it's Mike, anyone that you can get hold of, and make your thoughts clear, because that is the way that your thoughts get fed directly into the authority. And if you speak to one of us, I'm sure they will be fed in, because otherwise, most of us know an awful lot of people within the community, because we've been here quite a long time. Attending the varying markets and everything, I have an awful lot of time when I get talked to. I regret to say principally, the one thing people ask me about is planning, but which I rather refer to Stephen over that. But there are those important bits around the nature side that was talked about. It is part of our primary purposes. If you really want to influence that, get yourself a ticket on the 28th of November to the Natural England's Conference in Birmingham and go and lobby them and ask them why they have not got an up-to-date nature survey. That is their role nationally. They are the body responsible for surveying nature. They're in Birmingham, they've got their annual conference. Challenge them, go and ask them. I've just had the offer of a ticket come through to my phone now.
Oh, well, I'm not surprised.
But you have to challenge them, because I don't believe they are delivering on their responsibilities. And their responsibilities are what we use as our information in this national park to be able to determine direction. I'll just make a comment at the beginning of the presentation, back on what Dan put there around the National Parks Conference. Just to remind people, it was a National Parks UK conference. The basis of that conference is really to share thinking between national parks rather than outwards. The purposes of putting together the video was so that the public could see the approaches being taken. And the one takeaway comment I can iterate, so people sat around this table, that I had from so many other Park Authority members was, you're involved a lot with the community on Exmoor, aren't you? A lot more than we are, was the comments. That surprised me in some ways, but it didn't in others, because I think in a relatively small Park Authority, we do talk to an awful lot of people, and we actually can't do anything without somebody else doing it on the ground. The other thing it highlighted when you talk to an awful lot is we definitely don't get everything right. And that's why we do any of these forum meetings. But we have thrown the challenge out to the parishes a little while ago around contents of this meeting. Hazel's been overwhelmed with responses to put stuff in this meeting. Not. We've had to go hunting for stuff to put in. Now, if the parishes want to have involvement and engagement, pull your bloody finger out and do something. Don't expect everyone to come to you all the time. You come to us, we'll make it happen. We will talk to you. But I can't go and knock on everybody's door to see what they think. Thank you.
But we do want to know about things that we're responsible for and not things that we're not, if you like. We're very interested in trying to do all we can to assist the communities in things like transport and housing. And at the moment, we still do. We do a lot of helping people with the communities with housing and transport, but we're not responsible for it. That is the biggest thing we've got to say. And as far as you were saying about communications, we've now got a communications officer, and I'm sure that once you get bedded in, you'll start hearing a lot more about what's happening within the national park than what you have in the past. The gentleman sat next to me.
So, you touched on the housing matter. I just wondered, do you actually have a list or any way of compiling lists of housing sites that can be built on for affordable housing around the park? Because, you know, my son's just come back home, for instance, and he's very interested in perhaps a couple of years' time of actually building a house.
Yeah.
And he's working on it. Is there such a list at all?
There are various maps and lists which change and get updated as various parish surveys happen. So we're obviously involved with the rural housing coordinators in looking at sites that may become available. We do various calls for sites. I think it's a bit of it's probably the best thing is to talk with Ruth, who's really, really close to this, because it sounds like, you know, it's quite a specific thing, and if she'll be able to advise what Ruth MacArthur, what might be available, what the policy is, whether he puts the policy, and all of that, and the way through it.
So you do actually have a sort of an overview of what is available around.
We have an overview. There isn't a map that says these sites are available.
There is the SHLA list, which has sites which have been identified as potentially developable, could take housing development, affordable housing development. What that doesn't do, however, is to say that this will get planning permission. So it identifies potential sites, and we've had numerous people over the years that have come forward and said, well, I'd be quite interested in building there. Go to the planning department and just say, actually, is this capable of being developed? But the SHLA document is a public document. It is, I think, available online. And it's certainly worth looking at that just to see what sites have been identified, and then taking this to the planning department and talking to Ruth and just saying, look, is this something that I can move forward with? Or actually, was it something that, whilst it could work, for various reasons won't? So that, I think, would be the start of the process, the SHLA document.
Right. If there's nothing else, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending. The next meeting time will be published when we've sorted it out in the new year. Any issues that you want debated at that meeting, please let Hazel know.
So just one raise on the elements, gentlemen. The partnership plan or the plan for the park runs out next year. So it would be good for us as the parishes of Exmoor to have a lot of input in to a new plan, so that we make sure that next plan represents the whole community and the things that we want out, or to, you know, to be delivered out of a new plan. So perhaps we can discuss that, Mr. Chairman. That meets the criteria of the park authority, so that's not to be poo-pooed, is it?
No, definitely, that fits all right, that does, Roger.
Suggestion. Yeah.
I do come up with some excellent suggestions.
Right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.